And Tracy, I'm starting to share my screen.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Tracy Givens, the Interim Director of the Undergraduate Writing Center, and I am so happy to be here to talk to you today about medical school application writing. Before we move into talking about that, though, I just want to take a minute and talk to you a little bit about the Undergraduate Writing Center. Dustin, you can go to the next slide. The Undergraduate Writing Center is a service for undergraduate students. What we do is we offer one-to-one consultations, and we work with students at any stage of the writing process. We also offer workshops. Some of you may have used the Undergraduate Writing Center in the past. Some of you maybe have not heard of us before, but I want to make sure that you are aware that we are there to help you. Even with your medical school application writing, we'd be happy to help you with that. For more information about our services, you can go to uwc.ttu.edu. You can go there to get more information. You can go there to make an appointment, or you can call us, and we're extension 2, and make an appointment that way. All of our services are online this semester due to the pandemic. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. But even though we're online, we do offer face-to-face consultations. So it's kind of like a Zoom situation, but you still get that personal interaction with a writing consultant. Also, something to keep in mind, we are going to be hiring writing consultants in the fall. So if any of you are interested in doing something like that, or maybe if you know someone who would be interested in being a consultant at the Undergraduate Writing Center, please reach out to us and let us know, okay? All right, so workshop overview. We're going to be talking about purpose and audience, the writing process, and at the end, we're going to be giving you some tips to remember as you work on your application writing, some overall tips to remember, okay? Before we talk about purpose and audience, this information probably looks familiar to you, and I'm pulling it up because what's in common here is that regardless of which application service that you're using, regardless of which school that you're applying at, you will need to write a personal statement. So personal statement. So this workshop is going to lean primarily towards writing personal statements, okay? However, the things that we talk about in this workshop, the tips that you're given, the concepts and ideas that we go over, the majority of those can apply to any type of writing you're going to be doing in regard to your applications, okay? So purpose and audience. Let's talk about purpose. And please be sure to ask any questions as we're going along. I meant to mention this before we got started. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can type them up in the chat box. However, just make sure you speak up because we want to make sure that we're answering any questions that you may have. So, purpose. It's important to consider purpose when you're working on your writing, whether it's a personal statement or whether it's another type of prompt that you're having to respond to for your application. You want to consider why you're being asked to create the document and why you're being asked to share certain information. It's important that you consider this because when you understand purpose, you're going to produce a better product, right? It'll be more thorough, it'll be more specific. Okay. So what are some of the ways that you can identify purpose? Well, one way you can identify purpose is by examining the prompt, okay? Really looking in on that prompt to get an idea why you're being asked to do what you're being asked to do. So For example, let's think about the personal statement, right? In a personal statement prompt, you're usually being asked things like your motivation for wanting to pursue the path that you're pursuing, and things like that. So let's think about, what's the purpose of a personal statement? Well, a personal statement reveals who you are as an individual and unique person. A personal statement articulates specifically why you're a good fit for a program. A personal statement allows the committee to see why you would be successful in a program. So if you're keeping these things in mind, as far as purpose, again, it will help you produce a better document. It'll make sure that you're being more substantive in what you're saying, okay? So let's talk about audience for a second. Who is the audience? Why might it be important to know who the audience is? If y'all could take a second and answer that question in the chat, why do you think it might be important for you to know who your audience is when you're writing these types when you're doing this type of writing? Anyone want to take a shot at it? Why is audience important? Well, one thing to think about is, when you know who your audience is, you make better choices in your writing, correct? And you may not know specifically who your audience is, but even if you have a general idea of who your audience is, it will help you make better choices as far as your content and other decisions you make where your writing is concerned. So, for example, according to the Texas Tech University Career Center, the Texas Tech University Health Science Center School of Medicine Committee consists of 2 types of faculty. Clinicians and scientists. So scientists kind of seeking factual details and examples of deductive reasoning. They want to see the logical connections and things like that that you make in your personal statements about your experiences, for example, and how you fit with their program. Clinicians, they're seeking insight into your experiences and how they made you feel. So you're kind of trying to combine these together in a personal statement for your TTU Health Science Center School of Medicine Committee. It's helpful to know that these are the people who are on your committee. You can keep that in mind as you're putting together your personal statement. So in general, let's think about this, because you may not know, it depends on where you're applying, you may not know who is on the committee. Some things that you will know, that they're professionals, right? And they're likely in the medical field. So even knowing that information is very helpful in regard to thinking about the choices that you will be making in your writings. So what are the expectations of these types of audiences? Dustin? You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Your story. They want to know who you are as a person, okay? They want to see clear direction and vision about your future. So in other words, they want to see that you've given careful thought, careful consideration as to this path that you're taking. It's not something that you just decided on a whim. So they want to see there's some substance in regard to the path that you've chosen, in regard to why you chose this path, okay? They want to see that your goals align with the program's goals. Here we're talking about general expectations of the audience that you're going to want to be thinking about as you're writing your personal statement or any of your other writings. And they're going to be looking for consistency and attention to detail, right? Which makes sense, because this type of audience is physicians, the medical field, They pay attention to detail. It's a detail-oriented profession, right? So they're going to want to see that you also pay attention to detail. All right, so also they want to see that you have a professional tone, right? It's a professional audience. So they're going to want to see, they're going to expect you to also carry a professional tone throughout your personal statement. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. So purpose and audience, very, very important. If you're keeping purpose and audience in mind, it's going to lay a foundation for you that will make actually moving into the writing of your personal statement so much easier. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the writing process. And maybe just a show of hands here, or a yes, or a thumbs up in the chat, or something, or a thumbs down. How many of you have heard of the stages of the writing process? Any of you? A yes, a no, a maybe? Okay. Okay, good. Great. I see that some of you have. Okay, so basically the stages of the writing process are stages that writers are encouraged to go through in order to help them produce an effective document in the end, okay? So in these stages of the writing process, you have pre-writing, you have drafting, sharing, revising, basically, proofreading and editing. So real quickly, in the pre-writing stage, this is where you're doing a lot of your research, a lot of your thinking about the type of information that you need. This is the stage where you're analyzing your prompts and doing things like that. In the pre-writing stage, you're not writing your essay yet. You're gathering everything together that you're going to need to write, okay? In the drafting stage, this is where you start actually producing drafts of your paper, of your writing. And it's a work in progress. Why is it a work in progress? Because you're going to be doing multiple drafts. Ideally, you'll be sharing those drafts with someone that you trust, like maybe an advisor or a mentor, or us at the Undergraduate Writing Center, because it's always a good idea to get that second set of eyes on your paper to make sure that you're communicating what you want to communicate. And then you'll be revising also as you're going through this drafting process. So those arrows are showing that this is all recursive. This is a process that you'll be going through, this drafting, sharing, revising. And you will want to go through multiple drafts. Usually our first or second draft, we're just getting our ideas down, which is something that we need to do. It's very useful to get those initial ideas down. And then from there, you can go to refining your ideas, getting more specific in what you're trying to say, developing those ideas, and so forth. So you want to make sure you're going through, allow yourself enough time to go through that drafting process that you need to go through. Okay. All right, let's move on. So we are going to be talking about the pre-writing stage. Okay. And one of the things you'll want to do in the pre-writing stage in regard to your personal statement or any of your application writing is research the program in school that you're applying to, okay? Very important. Know the name of the specific program for which you're applying. This is one of the things that you want to make sure that you're clear on. That may seem like a small thing, knowing the specific name of the program, but again, think of who your audience is. This is an audience that pays attention to detail. So even something like slightly getting the name of the program wrong is going to stand out to them, okay? Note how the program describes itself. Note the type of language that's used, because once you start writing your paper, you can use similar language when you discuss your fit with the program, okay? Be knowledgeable about the area of specialization that interests you and how your career goals align with what the program offers. So you want to do some research, even in the area of specialization that you're interested in. because you want to be able to talk about it and show that you're knowledgeable about it, and be able to connect it to what the program is offering. So this type of research is very important, to show your audience that this is, again, something that you have thought about, you've given careful consideration to. You understand the path that you're taking, that you're going down, you're doing it deliberately, right? Also, you'll want to make sure that you use research about the program and the school in a way that is meaningful. And I give the example here of how often students will mention the mission of a school. And this is not something that you have to do in your personal statement, but sometimes students will do that. And they will do it because they want to show the audience, they want the audience to see that they've done some research about the program of the school. However, often when students do this, they don't show why the mission is attractive to them. They don't show why the mission is important to them. So they're not using the research in a meaningful way. So it's very important that you make sure that when you're talking about the research, when you're thinking about the research in regard to the program and the school, that you're thinking about how I use this in a meaningful way? How can I show that this information is important and significant as to why I chose this program and how it's going to help me with my career goals, okay? Something else that you also want to keep in mind is that there are other aspects of a school besides its mission. Once you get into your research, you may notice some other things that stand out to you that make the program of school really attractive to you, like their approach to learning, their accreditation standards, their values, things like that. So make sure when you're thinking about research, you're thinking about how you can use it about the program in school, you're thinking about how to use it in a meaningful way. All right, still in the pre-writing stage here. Remember, we're talking about the stages of the writing process. We're still in the pre-writing stage. In addition to researching the school and the program, you'll want to analyze the writing prompt very carefully, okay? It's crucial that you respond to the prompt. So take the time to dissect the prompt in the pre-writing stage. Really read that prompt and dissect it. How many parts does it have? Note the language used in the prompt. There might be certain words that really stand out that you really need to pay attention to and think about. Consider what you're being asked to do and the information you will need to meet that expectation when you're analyzing the prompt. And you might need help generating ideas, even when it comes to just analyzing the prompt and helping you come up with ideas of how you might respond to the prompt. You might engage in a brainstorming exercise, such as a free write or an outline or mapping. I don't know if any of you are familiar with any of these brainstorming activities, but a free write is basically where you just sit down and you just start writing. You're not thinking about paragraph form, you're not thinking about structure, you're not thinking about any of those things. You're just trying to get ideas down. And a lot of times in a free write, you'll surprise yourself because you'll hit on something that you hadn't thought of because you're just kind of writing off the top of your head stream of consciousness. Once you go back and read it, there might be a little gem in there that you managed to dig out of your brain, so to speak, from that free write that you might find really helpful. Also, mapping can be very, very helpful, definitely. And we're going to talk about mapping more in just a second. But let's go back to dissecting the prompt. Let's do a little exercise here. Dustin, we can go on to the next. Okay, we're going to look at the personal statement for the Texas Medical and Dental School application. The personal essay asks you to explain your motivation to seek a career in medicine. You are asked to include the value of your experiences that prepare you to be a physician. Okay, this is the prompt for that particular application services personal statement. Take a second, read through the prompt again, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. Okay, so going back to the idea of dissecting a prompt, how many parts does this prompt have? And you can just put it in the chat if you'd like to, but how many prompts, how many parts are there to this prompt? Anyone? Any idea? Okay, let's read through it again together. Good. Okay, I'm seeing some responses. Yes. Okay, yeah. So the first sentence, you're being asked to explain your motivation to seek a career in medicine. Okay. And then the second sentence, you're being asked to include the value of your experiences that prepare you to be a physician. So there are two parts to this, and it's important that you recognize that there are two parts to this because you want to make sure that you respond to the specific prompt and the entirety of the prompt, okay? Looking at that second sentence, you are asked to include the value of your experiences that prepare you to be a physician. What word stands out to you in that sentence? Remember, we also talked about paying attention to language in the prompt, certain words that may pop out in the prompt. In that second sentence, what word is sticking out that's probably very important that you want to pay attention to? You take a guess? Value. Yes, value. So they're asking you to include the value of your experiences that prepare you to be a physician. They're not asking you to just include experiences that prepare you to be a physician, right? The value of them. So that means you're going to have to talk about how they were valuable to you, the impact of them on you in regard to preparing you to be a physician. So that word there is very important. What about in the first sentence? What word stands out to you there? Motivation. Great, absolutely. Motivation. And listen, sometimes it can be difficult to talk about why you're motivated to do something, particularly when it's something you've always wanted to do. A lot of times we just think, well, this is just something I've always wanted to do. But when you have to talk about it in terms of yourself, because it's difficult to talk about ourselves, right, in writing. That can be challenging. So in regard to this word motivation, if you find yourself kind of stumbling where it's concerned, you can try one of the brainstorming activities that we talked about. For example, I think in using the mapping brainstorming tool would be very effective in regard to this. Dustin, we can go to the next slide. So, for example, this is an example of a mapping brainstorming session, so to speak. You don't have to use ovals or circles. You can use boxes, triangles. It doesn't matter what you use. But the idea is you start off with the word or you start off with the phrase that you're trying to get some more ideas about, and you just kind of branch off from there, right? So here we're using the example of motivation. And you're thinking, okay, what's my motivation for wanting to do this? Why do I want to do this? So maybe you think, okay, to help people. And remember, you're just kind of getting started in the brainstorming process. So you're likely going to be general as you're getting started. But you don't want to stop at to help people. And you don't want to stop there because that's very broad, right? I mean, that may be you do want to help people, but everyone applying wants to help people, right? So you know that that's too broad. So you want to keep going and seeing if you can get a little bit more specific. maybe one of the ways you want to help people. Well, I want to develop vaccines or whatever, okay? And you can have several branches coming out of the idea about to help people. I only have just one there. Another motivation could be you want to help your grandmother, okay? Again, you want to keep that generating those ideas. You want to keep branching out and seeing if you can get more specific in regard to your motivation. So maybe the idea that, that you want to help your grandmother moved you into an interest in geriatric medicine or something like that. So you just keep going and you keep seeing where the mapping will take you, okay? So again, brainstorming tools can be very useful. Keep them in mind. Mapping is a personal favorite of mine. Okay, so we looked at an example of a personal statement prompt, and we dissected it and talked about it. So let's look at another example of a prompt, and this is also from the Texas Medical and Dental School Application Service, the personal characteristics essay. This is the prompt for that. Because I want to, again, emphasize that what we're talking about in regard to personal statements, those things that we're talking about as far as audience and purpose, paying attention to detail, dissecting the prompt, and so forth, all those things will apply to this type of essay also, okay? So, learning from others is enhanced in educational settings that include individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Please describe your personal characteristics, background, talents, skills, etc., or experience that would add to the educational experience of others. So I'm going to give you a second, let you read through this again, and then we're going to break it down. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is dissect this prompt to try to figure out how many parts this prompt has to it. And when I talk about parts, I'm saying parts in terms of parts they want you to respond to. So looking at this particular prompt, how many parts do you need to respond to for this one? Any idea? This one's a little bit trickier than the other one. Anybody want to take a guess? Okay, that's a good guess. And yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where you get one from. Absolutely. So let's break this down and talk about it. So let's look at the first sentence. Learning from others is enhanced in educational settings that include individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Okay, what's going on in that first sentence? What's the idea behind that first sentence? Why do you think, and we're going back to purpose here, why do you think the committee included that first sentence? Are they perhaps trying to give you an idea of the purpose of this particular essay that they're going to have you write? Okay, good. Yeah, to direct answers towards diverse backgrounds and experiences. Absolutely. So let's talk about purpose here. Why do you think they want you to write this type of essay? What do you think is the purpose behind it? Just like with the personal statement, they want to know who you are as a person. They want to see how your experiences fit with the program, how you would fit in the program, how you would be successful in the program. There's a reason why they're asking you to write this type of essay too. Could it be that they want to see they want to see what you have to offer to the student body in the program? Okay. Again, thinking about the reason why they're asking you certain things is very important. Why they're giving you certain information, even in that first sentence, thinking about that is important. Let's go to the second sentence. Please describe your personal characteristics, background, talents, skills, etc., or experiences that would add to the educational experience of others. So this sentence is the sentence where they're actually asking you to do something, correct? They're wanting you to talk about personal characteristics and experiences in light of what those personal characteristics and experiences would add to the educational experience of others. So they want to see what you have to offer, perhaps to the student body and those around you, okay? Basically, yeah. Barrett, when you say one, they're basically asking, there's one part to this prompt. Yeah, definitely. One part, but if you look closely, you can also see that they're asking you to describe your personal characteristics and experiences for a reason. So you want to keep that reason in mind. They're not just asking you to describe these personal characteristics or experiences just to describe them. There's a specific reason attached to why they want this information, okay? So it's important to keep that in mind as you work on this type of essay, okay? Also, if you find yourself maybe having difficulty coming up with, well, do I want to focus on, what characteristics do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on my background? Do I want to focus on my skills? Again, a brainstorming exercise can be very helpful here. You might find yourself with this particular prompt doing more than one mapping exercise to figure out which way you want to go. Okay. All right. So we have been talking about the pre-writing stage. Okay. In the pre-writing stage, you're researching the program in the school and you're analyzing the prompts. Okay. Making sure that you're responding to those prompts in the ways that you need to. So let's talk about the drafting stage. Okay. So drafting your essay, some things that you need to think about. Be authentic. Be who you are. Okay. It's not necessary for you to have the big dramatic story. I know oftentimes working with clients at the Writing Center, sometimes there's the misconception that you have to have this big dramatic story. And it's not about the big dramatic story. I like to refer to the big dramatic story as like the Mount Everest story. You don't have to have the Mount Everest experience that you climb Mount Everest. If you do, that's great, but you don't have to have that. More than anything, they just want you to be authentic in regard to the experiences that you have had. They want you to be you. They want to see who you are in a personal statement, okay? Describe your experiences using vivid language to help you stand out as an individual. Bring a picture or image to your audience's mind. So not only do you need to be authentic and true to your own experiences, but you also want to describe those experiences in an interesting way. Making sure that they can picture what you're going through. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it's this idea of show, don't tell, right? If you're just telling them about your experience, it's not going to be very vivid. But if you're showing them, and what I mean by showing them, rather than just saying something like, I became motivated to be a physician when such and such happened. Rather than saying that directly, if you start describing a particular experience that you had, within your description of that experience, within your telling of that story, you can bring out the emotion and motivation. Okay? Explain the meaning of your experiences and how they connect, and connect them for your audience, as far as how they fit with the program and so forth. So when you talk about the experience, an experience, you want to think about the why or the so what. In other words, why am I including this experience? And what's the so what behind this experience? You want to make that connection directly for your audience. So you want to avoid assuming that the audience will know why you included that experience. You want to make it clear to them through the picture that you're creating, through the story that you're telling, why that experience is important and how it makes you a good fit for the program. All right. Continuing on, and remember, we're talking about the drafting stage of the process, of the writing process here. Focus on yourself rather than someone else in your life. Maybe there's someone who has been a great influence on your decision to pursue the path that you're pursuing, and that's great. And maybe for some reason you mention that person, but you want the personal statement, you want your writings to stay focused on you rather than someone else, okay? So even in the context of mentioning someone else, the focus should still be about you. As you're drafting, you want to maintain a professional tone. You want to avoid humor or informal language. So anyone have an idea why you might want to avoid humor? You just type it up in chat. I mean, you can include humor if you want to, but what might happen? What's the risk you're running there if you include humor in your statement? Any ideas? Exactly. It may not come across correctly with the reader. Some people may not find it funny. Exactly. Some might find it offensive. Someone on your committee might find it offensive. So it's a risk that, I recommend that you avoid. They might think you aren't taking it seriously. Absolutely. Great responses. Very true. So it's just best to avoid that. Also, you want to avoid informal language. And by informal language, I mean slang, cliches. Let's talk about cliches for just a second. A cliche is basically what? It's a saying or phrase that we use that's basically overused, right? It's used so much that it really doesn't have any meaning anymore. For example, an example of a cliche is, I want to help people, okay? That's used so often and it's so general and it doesn't tell the committee anything about you or who you are. It's not specific. So you want to avoid cliches, sayings that are very general like that, okay? Now, when you're writing your first draft, you'll probably have cliches all over the place, right? We all would, because it's your first draft. You're just getting your ideas down. But as you go through the drafting process, as you give yourself time to go through those multiple drafts, you should be able to find those cliches and replace them with more specific language. You will also want to be consistent. Again, thinking about who your audience is. This is an audience who's on the committee. We talked about how that is an audience that will be consistent and pay attention to detail. So, for example, again, going back to what we mentioned, using the example of you're referring to the program that you're applying to. You don't want to use in your personal statement, for example, or any other writing you may be doing, you don't want to refer to that program by several different names, right? You want to be consistent in how you refer to the program, to that program's name. And again, this may seem small, but I can't emphasize enough how they pay attention to things like that. Okay. Also, for example, if you decide to structure your personal statement around a certain theme, you don't have to do that, but some students like to have a theme. For example, I remember working with a client a few years ago, and I really wish I could remember the specifics of this client's personal statement because it was so effective. But the client's theme focused on his childhood and the experiences that he had cooking with his father as a child. His father taught him how to cook. And I know you're wondering, what in the world does this have to do with medical school? Because he was writing his personal statement for medical school. But somehow he managed to take that theme and turn it into a very effective personal statement. But again, you don't have to have a theme like that. But if you do decide that you want a theme like that, make sure that you stick with the theme throughout the essay. You don't want to start it and then you never mention it again, or you start it and you switch to another theme, okay? So consistency throughout the personal statement is very important. So what we are going to do is we're going to look at a couple of paragraphs. We sent you, before the workshop, a couple of paragraphs to read over from a personal statement. Those paragraphs focused very much on the research aspect of things. They were very research focused, which is perfectly fine because, you know, if that's kind of the way that you're going, it's a good example to look at. And if we have some time, we're definitely going to get into it and talk about it. But for now, I want to look at this paragraph and another one that's going to follow it. Let's see. Would you prefer for me to read this paragraph out loud, or do I have a volunteer who would read it out loud? Any volunteers? No? Okay, I'll go ahead and read it out loud myself.
Tracy, I can read it out loud if you'd like.
Okay, thanks, Dustin. So again, this is a paragraph from a medical school personal statement. And as we're reading through it, kind of pay attention to what's going on here, because I'm going to ask you about the purpose of this paragraph. What's the writer trying to do here? Okay, thanks, Dustin.
Mm-hmm. I was hospitalized for several months as a teenager and was inspired by the experience, despite the illness. In the time of diagnosis, treatment, and recovery, I met truly sick children. Children who were much more ill than me. Children who wouldn't recover. We shared a 4-bedroom and we shared our medical stories. Because of the old hospital building, there was little privacy in our room, and we couldn't help but listening in during rounds, learning the medical details, becoming experts in our 4 distinct cases. I had more mobility than some of the patients, and when the medical team and family members were unavailable, I'd run simple errands for my roommates and liaison informally with staff and attend to needs. To bring physical relief, a cold compress, a warm blanket, a message to a nurse filled me with such an intense joy and sense of purpose that I applied for a volunteer position in the hospital even before my release.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to read back through this again silently, and then we're going to talk about it. So what do you think the writer's purpose is here? What is the writer in this paragraph of the personal statement wanting to do? And you can just type it up in the chat, or you can speak out loud, whichever you prefer. What do you think is going on here? What's the purpose? Good. Okay. Their original motivation. Okay. That's a good one. Anything else? Any other responses? And we're going to talk about this idea of their original motivation in more detail in just a second. Planting their, oh, I think we lost some of your response there. First of all, what seems to be the overall purpose of this paragraph? Is it to show, to give an experience, to talk about an experience, right? Talking about this particular experience that she had when she was very sick as a child, okay? So the idea is to talk about an experience here, and yes, it's kind of like their original motivation. One thing stands out here. Do you see anywhere where the writer is, well, let me ask you this question. In regard to this experience, is the writer showing or telling? Is the writer telling about this experience or showing this experience? Showing, absolutely, Hannah. Rather than saying something like, I became motivated to be a physician when I was sick as a child, that's telling, right? And it's not like there's anything terribly wrong with that. It's just that the showing will get the attention of your committee more, right? It will draw them into what you're talking about. Can you feel, just from reading this paragraph, can you feel the writer's motivation? You feel it. You can feel it. And do you get a picture of what took place during this experience? You get a pretty vivid picture. You can kind of see them all in this one room with their 4 beds, right? And they're listening in on the rounds as the medical professionals come in to help them out and so forth. This student does a really effective job of painting a picture of this experience. And out of this picture, you get a sense, you can feel their motivation as to why they're going in the direction of the medical field. You even get a sense of their passion already for it in this particular paragraph. Okay? So, something to keep in mind, you're not going to get this out of your first draft. You probably won't even get it out of your second draft. You have to go through the drafting process, refine your ideas, develop them, and so forth. Give yourself time to craft a paragraph where you're showing an experience rather than just telling about an experience. Okay? Let's look at another paragraph. Okay. I'm going to talk you through this one a little bit because we're running a little short on time. But this is another paragraph from the same personal statement. And in this paragraph, the student is focusing more on academic endeavors and so forth. But the student is still doing it in a way where she's telling a story and she's connecting this experience to why she's pursuing the path she's pursuing and why she would be a good fit in this program, okay? And doing it in a way where she's showing rather than just telling, okay? So in the summer of 3rd year of my health sciences degree, I was chosen to participate in an undergraduate research fellowship in biomedical research at my university. As part of this experience, I worked alongside graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, medical students, physicians, and faculty in Alzheimer's research into biomarkers that might predict future disease. We collaborated in teams, and by way of the principal investigator's careful leadership, I learned where everyone falls in terms of rank. Each contribution is vital to the outcome. None of the work is in isolation. Move my chat box over a little bit. For instance, I was closely mentored by Will, a graduate student who had been in my role the previous summer. He in turn collaborated with postdocs and medical students turning to faculty when roadblocks were met. While one person's knowledge and skill may be deeper than another's, individual efforts make up the whole. Working in this team, aside from developing research skills, I realized that practicing medicine is not an individual pursuit, but a collaborative commitment to excellence in scholarship and leadership, which all begins with mentorship. So here the student is offering a different kind of experience than they offered before, but the student still does a very good job of being specific and talking about this particular experience and talking about why this experience was meaningful. Okay? Absolutely important. It has to be clear why the experience was meaningful. Okay. Dustin, we can go on to the next slide. So let's talk revision strategies. We talked about drafting, some things that you need to keep in mind when you're drafting a personal statement and when you're doing these types of writings. Let's talk about revision strategies, because remember, you're revising as you're drafting. So we already talked about how it's a really good idea to share your essay with a mentor, an advisor, the University Career Center, and even us, yes, at the Undergraduate Writing Center. Another revision strategy, reread the prompt and highlight in your paper where you specifically answer each part of the prompt. Like, for example, the personal statement prompt we looked at had 2 parts, right? So maybe the first part, to make sure that you answered that first part, you're going to go through and highlight everything that answers that first part in blue. And then the second part of the prompt, you go through and highlight everything that answers that part in yellow. Just to make sure that you are responding specifically to the prompt, okay? Ask yourself if you accomplished the purpose. We've been talking about purpose a lot. Why are they asking you these specific questions? What's the reason behind that? Because remember, if you understand the reason behind it, it will help you answer the prompt more thoroughly. So looking to see if you've accomplished your purpose, the purpose. And you can use that highlighting exercise for that also. Ask yourself if you show that you're well informed about the program in the school and connect that information to your career goals, okay? And another strategy, read your essay aloud to identify organization issues in areas that need more development. It may seem a little awkward to be sitting by yourself and reading your work out loud, but you'd be surprised the things that you catch when you do that. So I really encourage you to read your work out loud. These are just a few revision strategies. You may have some revision strategies of your own that would be helpful. But the idea is you do want to take the time to revise and revise thoroughly. Okay, so winding down here, tips to remember. Start early. Absolutely important. Start as early as you can, right? Because it will allow you to go through the stages that we were talking about. And it will allow you to go through those stages without feeling pressured for time. So please start early. Show, don't tell, okay? We saw some examples of showing where the writer was showing rather than just telling, rather than them saying they were motivated, they provided an experience that showed how motivated they were, okay? So in regard to this idea of show, don't tell, stand out in the details, right? Avoid generic language and cliches. We talked a little bit about cliches. Be authentic. We touched on this also. Be yourself, be who you are. Embrace your experiences and talk about those experiences in a vivid way. always think about the why. Why am I including this information? If you're going through and looking at your writing and you're not sure why you included something, that's a big flashing neon light. You want to pay attention to that part. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you just needed to connect it to something else. But always ask, why am I including this information? Okay. So these are just a few tips to keep in mind as you're working on your application writing. Okay, I know I covered a lot of information and we are just about out of time, but do you have any questions? Of course, you can always visit with us at the Undergraduate Writing Center and bring any questions that you may have in regard to this type of writing. We would be more than happy to help you. But if you have any quick questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, no? Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, taking the time to drop in. Hopefully, you're walking away with some information that will be helpful to you. We do post our workshops on our YouTube channel. And Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, but our YouTube channel is TTU Writing Center, correct? I think you're on mute, Dustin.
Sorry about that. Yeah, yeah, that is correct. It's TTU Writing Center, and you can find this video. I'll get it uploaded later this week, hopefully by the end of the week, but as soon as I can. And we also have other videos of previous workshops we've done and other instructional videos. So definitely go check that out.
Absolutely. And again, I say, please consider visiting us at the Undergraduate Writing Center so you can have that one-on-one session with someone. Okay. Oh, I see a quick question. How long are personal statements usually? Word count. Okay. Well, I noticed as I was going through and looking at the application services that you guys use, they do give you a specific count. They have a character count. Like, for example, for the Texas Medical and Dental School application personal statement, if I recall, that's 5,000 characters. So make sure that you look. Sometimes personal statements do not tell you how long they want them to be. And in general, I wouldn't go over more than 2 pages. But in the case of you guys, they're pretty specific as far as the length. All right. Well, thank you again. And we hope to see you at the Undergraduate Writing Center. Have a good day.